The guys are going to be dropping a couple of bodies today, and I thought I'd give you a couple of pointers what we do here in-house when we do that. This is a Gen 4 L99. It has not got the harness yet. You do want to install the engine harness before you drop the body. You want to install the entire accessory drive, which this vehicle has. You want to make sure your engine mounts are in, your engine's level, everything is tight. You want to install your fuel line and evap stuff, which this has not been completed yet. Let's take a quick look over here. Actually, before we do, notice that the power steering and the brake system have not been touched in this vehicle. They remain closed and sealed, and they will be put back right where they were when the body is dropped. Let's take a look at an LT-1 in a chassis. You can see how compact the LT-1 is for a 460 horsepower engine. This is just a phenomenal combination. This Jeep does have an S-Pod, an E92 computer, an under-the-hood ARB compressor, and a T43 transmission controller. You can see it gets pretty tight, but it all fits. So let's look at a LT-1 that we're about to drop the body on. First, notice that we got some plumb bobs on here. These will help you line up the body mounting points, so when you drop the body, you know you're pretty much right on. We have our accessory drive completely installed. This Jeep is going to get hydraulics. It has a redneck ram box. We got some shock reservoirs. Make sure your spark plug wires are tight. These are kind of hard to get to afterwards. These spark plug wires, you want to put some dielectric grease on the boots and slide them in until they snap. You will see that this one harness is loose because that's your O2 sensors on the passenger side, which is bank 2. Those will be secured to the body up out of the way. You notice that the fuel lines, the vent lines have all been installed. Notice that the fuel lines and the tranny line have the proper heat protection. We will be installing a heat shield on this transmission. Coming around, again, you will see that the power steering has already been installed. This brake system has not been opened. It will be snapped into the body. Our shift cables are ready to be hooked up. You'll notice that we have a transmission and a transfer case shift cable. They'll be going here. We have our 8L90 transmission cooler lines, our 8L90 shift lever. Coming back here, you'll see that all of our evap has been installed. We relocated this evap canister to the back. You'll notice that starting in 2012, Chrysler did start installing their own fuel tank pressure sensor. The earlier JKs did not have it. You'll notice that we have a vent solenoid. That is a GM component that really steps up the evap system performance. You probably never smell fuel or hydrocarbons in one of our swaps running the full closed loop feedback evap system. We've got our tire pressure monitor module here. You notice that the e-brake cables have been routed approximately where they're going to drop when this body comes down. There's really not a lot to hook up once the body's down. Earlier JKs had an extra body mount up here, which the later JKs don't run for whatever reason. So once this body's down, you're going to put all the body bolts in, and I'm going to show you in a second how we like to align the body. But let's talk about the connections that we have. This is our fuel filler vent. This is our fuel filler. They're going to obviously go right here. This Jeep does not have the anti-spitback intermediate tube. You might consider getting one of those. They're not very expensive at your local dealer if your Jeep is suffering from anti-spitback. This Jeep did have a rear view camera that's aftermarket. That will have to be installed. Other than that, we have our main C300 connector, which we're going to come up here. This is our C300 connector here, and that's going to go into the body here, and that's the majority of the wires that communicate between the body and the chassis. That's all your ABS signals, fuel level, fuel pump, etc. This customer does have LED lights, so we've got some aftermarket wiring here. This is our Motec air conditioning block that we manufacture for the Gen 5 variable displacement compressors. This is our Motec power steering pump mount, which is designed for the 12 and newer JK pumps. You'll notice that we have most of the wiring laying on top of the engine for the drop. This engine, as we discussed earlier, is running a truck drive, which works excellent. You can see it lays out well. We have no interference here with the upper control arm on the passenger side. We've got plenty of room to the power steering gear. There's some compromises in the Gen 4s when you run the GM drive, but in the Gen 5s they lay out really well. Really happy how they come out. Here's our transmission cooler lines, which is going to come up to the original Pentastar cooler, which works well. This is our dual stage oil pump, cam phaser, cam sensor. We are running a factory tensioner, GM tensioner. You'll notice that we're running the factory GM harness with factory connectors, including the interior and the chassis. This is an earlier Gen 5 harness that's running a busman fuse block. The newer harnesses run the factory power distribution center connector right off the GM harness into our power distribution center. It's plug and play. This is a spreader tube that we manufacture to get the coolant from the top driver down to the passenger lower. We have a problem running the lower outlet on the driver's side because we have the steering gear here. So we run the spreader tube. It works really well. The upper outlet is going to go directly over to a single pass radiator, which we find works really well. This Jeep will be running a Camaro SS fan, which is a very powerful fan. This were a truck motor, it would have a third groove back here for a vacuum pump. The LT-1s do have a vacuum port for your power brakes, and you can see that's already been installed. Install as much stuff as you can before the body drop. You'll notice that we've installed virtually all the wiring. It's laying on top of the intake. Once this body is down, it's just a matter of plugging stuff in. So if you're doing it with a body on and you got the front grill off, here's the issue you're going to run into. First, not only does the grill have to come off, but all this stuff has to come off too. Winch, bumpers, lights, and this is excessive, guys. If you look how much airflow is being blocked, I think you can see that this thing isn't going to breathe as well as it should. My suggestion is going to be at first to remove these lights, maybe move them outboard. Stingers like this can also cause issues at 70, 80 miles an hour. Airflow hits it and goes up over the hood. Now with a Camaro SS fan, it's unlikely this vehicle will overheat because it's such a powerful fan. But why make that fan work so hard? I've been on test drives where I will actually watch the commanded percentage, and with all these obstructions it can run 60, 70, 80%. With all these obstructions gone, we're running 20, 30, 40%. So keep that in mind. Keep that grill clear. Keep it open. You don't want to block. So earlier I mentioned about dropping the body. This is your front body mount, which has a stud on the body. When this stud drops through this hole, it can move back and forth about 1/2 of an inch. You want to drop it right into the middle. If you need to fudge it later for firewall clearance or fan clearance, you can always move it forward a little or back a little. But this is your witness mark. This is where you drop the body and take your measurement from. All the other body mounts are just basically through holes. So get the body down, get this centered, then tighten your body down. And if you're using our easy mounts, you should be really close. And our easy mounts are fully adjustable. You can adjust them for height, left and right, and fore and aft. So it's a very versatile setup, and this LT-1 being as compact as it is, fits perfectly in a JK with no modifications. There is no modification on this chassis. We have not cut these engine mounts off. We have not moved any of the electrical. We have not moved any of the braking wires. It's really a slick setup. We're even using all the factory power steering hoses. That compressor is being controlled by the GM computer, not only for AC idle bump, but cooling fan or condenser pressure and evap temperature. It's all integrated right through the factory computer the way it should be. This Jeep is going to get hydraulics, as I mentioned, so we're going to install those hoses later with a ram. You'll notice that we don't modify the body either. We don't bash in the firewall. We don't take any of the wiring out or relocate the battery. It all remains stock. You'll see that the heater hoses on the LT-1 are easy because they come straight out. We don't got to run a 90-degree. We try to make this swap as non-evasive as possible using as many factory components as we can. And again, this is a factory LT-1 from a 2018 Camaro or Corvette. That is a new 2018 GM 8L90 transmission, and we're running a 241J on this build, which works perfectly fine. We make an adapter for it, and it's up to the horsepower. So I look forward to driving this Jeep. I love driving these LT-1s with these 8 speeds. I just did a couple of test drives with this exact combination, and they're awesome. Cruising at 80 miles an hour, completely stress-free, at low RPM, but still having all the power in the world to launch out of the hole. These LTs are phenomenal engines, and I do feel they're going to be a big part of the engine swap community for the next 5 or 10 years.